Did I get your attention with this title? Good. Don't worry, I'm not becoming a conspiracy theory channel. The topic of this video is our longtime favorite series, Rome by HBO, and its portrayal of relations between the Romans and the Jews in the late Republican period. Its second season touches upon it in one of its subplots, so I wanted to provide some historical context and examine how well it reflects the actual events. We'll look into the first contacts between the peoples of Rome and Judea, and into some of the politics of the time when the Republic was spreading its influence over the Eastern Mediterranean. Since this can be a touchy subject, I should remind people in the comment section that all mockery of Jews and their one God should be kept to an appropriate minimum. The first official Roman-Jewish diplomatic relations were established in 160 BC during the Maccabean Revolt. The Roman Republic pledged some vague support to the Jewish independence movement against the Seleucid Empire, but didn't actually send any troops to assist it. Nevertheless, the revolt succeeded, and the semi-autonomous Kingdom of Judea was created. This is also a time when the first sizable Jewish immigrant community established itself in Rome. Refugees fled the ravages of war not only from Judea, but also from big Hellenistic cities like Alexandria and Antioch. The late 2nd century BC is when we get our first epigraphic evidence of the Jewish presence in Rome. There is a funerary inscription that records the names of freed slaves, Marcus Aronius Sabina, Publius Caesonius Akiba, and Publius Caesonius Stephanus. Akiba is 100% a Jewish name. Sabina is also Semitic, and Stephanus is a name that typically comes from Hellenistic East. These three guys were most likely slaves captured during the wars between Seleucid Empire and Ptolemaic Egypt. They arrived in Rome through slave trade and were later freed and granted Roman citizenship. In a typical historical fashion, the Jews first got expelled from Rome as soon as 137 BC. Valerius Maximus reports that consul Gnaeus Cornelius Hispalus ordered them to return home for trying to spread the cult of Jupiter Sabatius. Jupiter Sabatius was a Phrygian deity associated with Dionysus, but it can be just a reference to the god of Abraham. The Hasmonean Jewish kingdom gained full independence in 110 BC, and over the next few decades expanded its dominion to the Mediterranean and east to the River Jordan. However, it soon fell to internal conflicts. In 63 BC, Pompey Magnus intervened in the civil war between two Hasmonean brothers, captured Jerusalem, and placed the kingdom under the Roman protectorate. The events of the HBO's show start in 52 BC. By this time, the Jewish community of Rome has grown. The biggest influx happened in the aftermath of Pompey's conquest. Jews arrived both as slaves and as free immigrants. However, they were still a very small minority, numbering around a couple of thousands in a population of over 500,000. Cicero writes that members of the Jewish community in Rome were obliged by custom to send gold to Jerusalem on the order of the Jews from Italy and from all our provinces every year. Our only Jewish character in the first season of Rome is Timon. He does dirty work for Atia, who keeps his loyalty with sexual favors. We'll learn more about him in the second season, when we're introduced to his family. They are first-generation immigrants from Judea, who probably fled the Hasmonean civil wars and Pompey's conquest. Timon is a Greek name. The character's Hebrew name is Tevye. Hellenization was one of the main political issues of the Jewish society in that age. Greek language and customs influenced Hebrew culture during the period of Seleucid domination. The Greek word synagogue, for instance, replaced traditional Judaic terminology for the places of worship. Some Jews took on Greek names and adopted Greek customs to better fit in the Hellenic society, while others bitterly rejected them and strove to preserve the ancestral culture. This conflict is reflected in the relationship between Timon and his brother Levi. Levi is involved in Jewish internal politics. He is a member of a group that seeks to free Judea from the rule of outsiders. His group can be seen as a precursor to the Zealots, a radical movement that formed as a response to Roman rule in the beginning of the 1st century AD. According to Josephus, Jewish internal politics of the Second Temple period had two main factions called the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and a third smaller one called the Essenes. Roughly speaking, Sadducees represented the upper classes, Pharisees represented the urban commoners, and the Essenes were mostly rural ascetic people. Sadducees favored Hellenization, and Pharisees resisted it. but both groups could ally with non-Jews for their political gain. For instance, it was Pharisees who helped Pompey to conquer Jerusalem. Levi's group in the show can't be classified as belonging to Pharisees or Sadducees. They agitate for independent Judea, but this doesn't really fit in the context of Jewish politics of the time. In the 40s BC, it was more about the dynastic squabbles rather than resistance to outside influence, which only became a major issue half a century later. Which brings us to one of the main players in those dynastic squabbles, and another Jewish character of the show's second season. Prince Herod is first introduced in the 7th episode of the season as the vassal of Rome and Tetrarch of Galilee. Galilee is one of the regions established by the Romans in the former Hasmonean kingdom. The events of the episode take place soon after the victory of the Second Triumvirate of Brutus and Cassius at Philippi. To get up to date with the events in Judea, we need to recount what has happened since Pompey captured Jerusalem. So, in 63 BC, the war was going on between two heirs to the Hasmonean throne, Hyrcanus II and his younger brother, Aristobulus II. Both brothers appealed to Pompey for help, and the Roman general decided to back Hyrcanus. He defeated the armies of Aristobulus multiple times, captured Jerusalem, and established a Roman protectorate over the region. The former Hasmonean kingdom lost its Mediterranean shore and the Hellenistic cities in the east, known as Decapolis. The Jews were allowed a lot of autonomy in their internal matters, but the taxation and military matters were managed by the Roman governor of Syria. Around 57 BC, Aulus Gabinius, proconsul of Syria, split the former Hasmonean kingdom into Galilee, Samaria, and Judea. Hyrcanus was appointed the ethnarch and the high priest of Judea, while his brother was kept in Rome as a potential counterweight to his influence. Most of Hyrcanus' administrative power was in the hands of his senior advisor, Antipater. Antipater was adept at navigating the diplomatic landscape of the Eastern Mediterranean. He was the one who ensured Pompey's support for Hyrcanus. When the civil war between Caesar and Pompey broke out, Antipater and Hyrcanus originally supported their patron Pompey, but quickly switched allegiances when he was killed in Egypt. When Caesar was besieged in Alexandria, Antipater rushed a force of 13,000 men to relieve him. This earned him the gratitude of the Roman dictator, who elevated him to Roman citizenship and appointed him a procurator of Judea. In 47 BC, Antipater made his sons Herod and Phasael the governors of Galilee and Jerusalem respectively. Antipater was assassinated in 43 BC, and his death sparked another bout of the civil war in the region. Antigonus, Hyrcanus' nephew, took the throne of Judea from his uncle with the backing of the Parthians. He actually bit off Hyrcanus' ear to disqualify him from serving as the high priest. Herod fled to Rome and asked for Roman support in the struggle against his relatives. That's what we see in the show. The historical timing is done perfectly. Herod's delegation took place in 40 BC, the same year Antony married Octavia. We also know that, like in the show, the Tetrarch primarily dealt with Antony, who was in charge of the Roman East. Parthian interference in Judea presented a challenge to Roman authority in the region that needed to be answered. Herod's trip to Rome went better than expected. The Senate appointed him the king of the Jews and gave Herod an army to win Judea for himself. This same army would later form the bulk of the force for Antony's ill-fated invasion of Parthia. With the backing of Rome, Herod took Jerusalem back from Hasmoneans and their Parthian allies, and secured his position as the sole king of Judea. Most of the people know Herod from the New Testament and the massacre of the innocents, but he is quite an interesting character in other regards. Just like his father Antipater, he had to navigate the politics of another Roman civil war, and just like his father, he backed the losing side first, but was able to keep his position through shrewd diplomacy. He ruled his client kingdom for 40 years and enjoyed a lot of autonomy. His dynasty, however, did not survive for long. His son, Herod Archelaus, mismanaged his province and provoked a revolt in 6 AD, which required the Romans to interfere. It was suppressed by none other than Publius Quintilius Varus, who is infamous for losing 3 legions at the Battle of Teutoburg. After the revolt, the Romans assumed a direct control over Judea. Unfortunately, the show had to be rushed to the end, so we don't get to see what happened with Herod after his visit to Rome. But we do get a small glimpse into the politics of Jewish diaspora. Timon and his brother crash a meeting where the Jewish congregation discusses Herod's request for financial support. It's a very nice touch, in line with Cicero's writings about the organized Jewish community sent in gold annually to Judea. Levi and Timon seize the stage and say that they shouldn't support Herod because he is a Roman puppet. To which the elder replies,
"Would you have the Seleucids rule Judea, or the Ptolemies? Better one we know, one we can work with."
This is a slight historical inaccuracy. The Seleucid Empire was completely destroyed in 63 BC, the same year Pompey established protectorate over Judea. The elder's options should have been Parthia, because that is who backed Herod's political opponents. The brothers then agitate for a completely independent Judea, insult everyone in the gathering, and rough them up with a band of supporters. As I've said, I'm not entirely sure which political group they are supposed to represent. Complete independence wasn't really a realistic option for Judea at that time. Brothers planned to assassinate Herod, but Timon, who quit working for Atia because of excessive violence, doesn't want to go back to murdering people and refuses to participate at the last minute. At the end, he and his family move to Judea, as Timon wants to leave his Roman life behind and to reconnect with his ancestral faith. I read somewhere that if the series wasn't cancelled, it would keep following Timon in his homeland, where he would eventually meet Jesus in person. I wonder how that would have worked out. Timon is at least in his 30s at the end of the second season, and would have been more than 90 years old when Christ entered Jerusalem. Who knows, maybe Timon was supposed to meet him in his childhood. I really appreciate the level of detail put into the portrayal of small aspects of Roman history in this show. Despite rushing the production, the creators managed to tie Herod's delegation to Rome both with the main narrative and with Timon's subplot, and to keep the timeline consistent with the actual history. It's a shame that the show had to be cancelled, and we didn't get to see more of these characters' stories. I hope this video was helpful for your understanding of the early relationship between the Romans and the Jews. If you have questions on this topic, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching till the end, and I will see you in the next one.